All right. Thank you for joining. This is the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation simulation. We are simulating the creation and the existence of a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine based on secular democratic principles with separation of power between the parliament, the executive branch, and the legislative branch. So that it is clear, we are not proposing the dismantling of the Israeli or the Palestinian government. We are proposing the creation of an additional third government for the people of Israel and Palestine based on secular principles that would include the area of Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel, 14 million people, based on equality, based on one person, one vote, that would represent the entire area as a whole. My name is Joseph Avasar. My email is josephavassar@gmail.com. And you can send me your comments at any time, and I will respond to that email. We have a website. Our website is ipconfederation.org. If you go to it's in 3 languages, Arabic, English, and Hebrew. If you go to the Constitution in that website, you'll be able to read the Constitution of the government with the 3 branches, how it will be created, and how it will be able to make peace. The idea is that the parliament members will be able to pass legislation, and once the legislation is passed by both the Israeli and the Palestinian parliament members, the Israeli and the Palestinian governments will be given a veto power. So you can go to that website and read the entire legislation and the entire Constitution, I'm sorry. And we also have it in a question and answer format to make it more palatable for people to understand the concept. Today we have Dr. Mordechai KEDAR as a speaker. Dr. Mordechai KEDAR, researcher and lecturer on Islam and sociology of the Arab world. Dr. KEDAR is an expert on Islam and Arabic culture. He served as a military intelligence officer in the Israeli army. He appeared numerous times on Al Jazeera and other international media. Dr. KEDAR received his doctorate degree from Bar-Ilan University, where he subsequently became a lecturer at the Department of Arabic Studies. He participated with several research centers and think tanks in Israel and abroad. He is described as one of the few Arabic-speaking Israeli pundits seen on Arabic media defending Israel. He is an advocate of the 8-state solution, a formula based on homogeneous tribes emulating the United Arab Emirates. I promised Dr. KEDAR we will invite him again so he will be able to give us a full lecture on his 8-state solution that is based on emulating the United Arab Emirates. But today we are doing a simulation. Our next speaker will be Joseph Avasar, me. I will be speaking about the IPC accomplishments today to that date and its challenges for the future. I hope you join. That will be on December 11th. The simulation timeline is approximately 120 minutes. We will have several segments, about 5 minutes each segment. And then after each segment, we will have a conversation with Dr. KEDAR. And then we will have audience question and answers to Dr. KEDAR and closing remarks. For those of you that are not familiar with the IPC formula, I'd like to play this video. This short 2 minutes, I believe, video that explains the concepts.
The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has endured for generations, and instead of time healing the wounds, it's only caused the anger to fester and the violence to grow. But what if there was a way to alleviate the tension? Something that may not outright solve every problem, but at least create a forum that encourages a peaceful compromise. Welcome to the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, a common third government between the Israeli and Palestinian citizens, specifically designed to foster peace, tolerance, and economic prosperity between the two nations. Here's how it works. First off, both Israel and Palestine will keep their respective governments. Israel's Knesset and the Palestinian National Authority will remain unchanged. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, IPC, will be a third entity, acting as a unifying agent between the two. The IPC will comprise 300 parliament members elected from 300 districts in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Above them will preside a president and vice president, one Israeli and one Palestinian. In order for the IPC to pass a law, it will require a 55% majority from its Israeli representatives, as well as a 55% majority from its Palestinian representatives, thereby preventing either side from monopolizing the legislature. Of course, the IPC won't undermine the political power of either the Israeli or the Palestinian government. At any time, Israel or Palestine may veto a law passed by the IPC. If neither side vetoes, the law is passed, and the two nations are another step closer to resolution. Please help us make this a reality. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. We might speak different languages, but we all mean the same thing.
So before each simulation, we take a survey. We'd like to take a survey right now. It's a pre-simulation survey. Please vote. And Dr. KEDAR, you can vote as well. At this time, do you support a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine in the West Bank, Gaza, and Israel that will coexist with the Israeli and Palestinian governments? At the end of the simulation, we will conduct another survey to see if there is a change in opinion. Please vote. Dan, can you put the vote? Okay. All right, at this time we have, let's give a little bit more, okay, so we have 73% of the audience voted yes, and 27 voted no. We'll see how, if there is a change one way or another at the end of the simulation. Simulation objective is to demonstrate that a common government could make peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but not only between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but also with the neighbors in the area. We are not anti-Israel or anti-Palestine. We are pro-peace. Dr. KEDAR is not a representative of the IPC. He was invited, just like we invite other people, to conduct a stress test, to voice his opinion. He is not a spokesperson for the IPC. I think this is his first time in a IPC simulation. We are pro-peace. We believe that a common government, and so do we, have our own narrative. It's not the Israeli narrative, it's not the Palestinian narrative, but a common narrative that would benefit, in our opinion, the entire area, not only Israel or Palestine. I expect to have a rigorous discussion, but we will need to be respectful of each other and of Dr. KEDAR. Let's not attack each other on a personal level. Let's have a honest, rigorous discussion. We do not preclude other formulas. All formulas for peace are welcome, and we are happy to produce, to show them. We believe that this formula is the best, and we are not claiming exclusivity. We will ask Dr. KEDAR to to judge and our plan based on these three criteria. Could the IPC formula attain peace? Is the IPC plan implementable? Is there a downside for either the Israelis or the Palestinians if it is implemented? But we are asking that you would not judge our formula based on perfection. Nothing is perfect in this world, and this plan is not a perfect plan. But we're asking that Dr. KEDAR will, and all of you will judge this plan based on what's the alternative, not on what's perfect. We will be demonstrating by legislation. I mean, we will conduct this simulation by proposing legislation and a constitution, a short version of a constitution. What we show today is the tip of the iceberg. There are a lot more legislation that the common government could pass. So that is clear. We are not the common government. We are only simulating what it could be doing, what it could pass. We're asking you to look at the big pictures and avoid technical arguments about the legislation and the constitution that it will be presented to you. We will ask you to refrain from comments, but questions are encouraged. So comments are things like, this is unrealistic, Israelis will never allow it to happen, or the Palestinians. These are comments. You can put those comments in the chat, but we are encouraging questions. In other words, we are discouraging comments, but we are encouraging questions. Like, isn't it better to have two states first? Wouldn't one state make more sense? Is it realistic to separate religion from government in the Middle East? Is this proposal to dismantle the Jewish state? What gives the government legitimacy? Would Israel allow this to happen? Is there a precedent for this? Could people from Hamas run? What would give this government teeth, etc.? These are questions that are encouraged. We're just giving you examples of questions. These are facts that we're asking you to accept as facts, that the Israeli Prime Minister represents Israeli only. By the way, we are going to accept the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu is the Prime Minister of Israel for this simulation. That the Palestinian leaders represents the Palestinians only. But we will be asking you to assume certain things. First of all, so these are not facts, these are assumptions that the whole simulation is dependent upon. That we held an online elections for the last 3 months. In other words, that we actually had election for 3 months, ended today, online, meaning on the internet. That the IPC election included, gave an opportunity to 14 million people. That's in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Of course, that would be excluding minors, but other than excluding minors, 14 million people will be allowed to vote in Gaza, the West Bank, and in Israel. We also asking you to assume that 5 million people voted, the 3 million Palestinians voted, and 2 million Israelis voted. We're also asking you to assume that we elected a president, that the president received 1.5 million votes. I'm also asking you to assume that me, Joseph, I was elected the president. So that is clear, I never intend to run as president. I'm not even qualified under the Constitution, but to make it easier in this simulation, I'm asking you to assume that I was elected president. And we had a vice president, lady, Palestinian. She received 1.3 million votes, and she will become president after 2 years, and I will become vice president. But we each have constitutional duties based on the Constitution, which you can read on our website. I also asking you to assume that 300 parliament members were elected, and I'll ask many of you to act as parliament members. Each parliament member represents 47,000 people. So if you divide 14 million by 300, you'll get 47,000 people in each district. And 300 parliament members have been elected. So let me ask, first of all, Mr. KEDAR, are you willing to accept those assumptions?
For the presentation, it's okay. Carry on.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who has a question about the assumptions or unwilling to accept them?
Well, I do have a comment.
Joseph.
I do have a comment here.
Sure.
That the presentation is based on the pre-assumption that the Palestinian entity accepts the existence of Israel as a state of a Jewish state.
No,
And-
it doesn't. It doesn't. Yes, these are the assumptions. There is no assumption
The
that.
assumption is that there are two states, Israeli and Palestinian, mutually accepted by each other.
No, that's not part of the assumptions. The assumptions are that we held an election for 14 million people for the whole area. We are not assuming anything about the Israeli government or the Palestinian government accepting or rejecting or anything about them. We are a different government. We are a separate government, and we are not assuming anything on their part in these
Okay.
assumptions. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Joseph, could you improve the volume, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you improve the volume?
You want me to increase the volume?
Yes, please. It's not as good as it was.
Okay, let me see how I.
There is a good question in the chat.
Okay, this is as much as the volume I can increase. What is the question in the chat?
Do
I-
Israelis include Arab Israelis?
Yes, 14 million people, Israelis, Palestinian in the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. 14 million people. Any other questions?
If you come back a little, one short facts. Israeli prime minister represents Israelis only. Palestinian leaders represent. So what do you mean? Is there an Israeli state and a Palestinian state? What is an
No,
Israeli?
no,
prime
it means that for the purpose of this simulation, we are, these are facts that the Israeli prime minister, he is elected by Israelis only. We're not talking about
What do you
state.
mean by Israelis? What do you mean by Israelis?
People that are given the right to vote under Israeli law.
Which belongs to the state of Israel?
You asked me, what do you mean by Israelis? That's what I
Yes.
said. We do not speak about state at all.
So what is the definition of Israelis?
Israeli is a person who is recognized by Israeli law as a citizen of Israel.
Of the state of Israel.
Yes,
Okay, and the second question, the second line, Palestinian leaders represent Palestinians only. How
Correct.
do you define Palestinians?
Palestinians are people that are recognized as citizens of Palestine by the Palestinian government.
Means there is a Palestinian state.
No, that's not what it means. It means,
So
you asked me,
they are
how do I
citizens of
define?
which country? What country are they citizens of?
They are citizens. They are their government. The government, we do not say what countries they are citizens of.
Jordan,
Okay,
Syria.
let me read to
Egypt.
you under the Constitution.
Joseph, I'm asking an informative question. Are they citizens of Egypt or Jordan or Syria or Lebanon or what?
Okay, let me read to you. The Constitution's define Israeli citizens, a person who is recognized under Israeli law as a citizen of Israel.
of the state of
Palestinian
Israel.
citizen is a person who is recognized under Palestinian law as a citizen of Palestine.
Means of the state of Palestine.
No, it doesn't say the state of Palestine. Let me read to you again.
What is Palestine?
It doesn't say. The whole, we are conducting an election for the whole area of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. We are conducting election for the 14 million people.
Who are what?
The 14 million people,
Regardless of their citizenship?
exact.
Means, look, the state of Israel exists. There
Okay,
is a state named Israel. There is no state named Palestine yet.
okay.
So
We're not challenging that.
okay, this is something which I don't understand. Okay, carry on. Let's see.
Okay.
where we-
All right, so that is, so, I am saying, we are saying that the assumptions are, these assumptions are achievable with a small financial commitment. 1 day of war between Israel and Gaza, full-fledged war, is over $100 million. Those assumptions could be easily achieved if we apply 1 day of war between Israel and Palestine into creating a common government. So now I'm asking you, first, we need people in the simulation to act as leaders. I need a person to volunteer to be Israeli prime minister. Do I have an Israeli prime minister? A person who is acting as Israeli prime minister?
You always have me.
Okay. And that's, any other? Okay, Len, you are it. We need a Palestinian Authority leader. Do we have a volunteer acting as Palestinian Authority leader? We need volunteers, guys, in order to make this happen.
I can do that. It's Zohar.
Zohar, terrific.
Thank you.
Okay, and I need a Hamas leader. Do I have a person who is willing to act as Hamas leader?
Yossi, Boker Tov, זה אמנון. I'll be the Hamas leader.
Terrific. Okay. Okay, the rest of you, I will be asking you to choose. Either you are Palestinian or Israeli parliament members. And I'll help you choose by, I'll show you a map so that you can choose to be either Israeli or Palestinian parliament members, so that it is possible for you to be to represent an exclusive Palestinian area in, let's say, Gaza, or a mixed area in Jerusalem or the West Bank. But I'm asking you to be intellectually honest and to remain a Palestinian or a Israeli parliament member throughout the simulation, because we will be asking you to vote. And I may ask you, what district do you represent? So please choose if you want to be Israeli or Palestinian parliament member. Dr. KEDAR, you can also be a parliament member if you choose. There is no contradiction. You can be both the speaker and a parliament member. All right, so let's do a test. Let's have the Palestinian parliament members just vote so we see how many we have. Palestinian parliament, please vote yes, so we see how many we have. Okay. All right, right now we have 13 Palestinian parliament members. And let's have Israeli parliament member vote. So see how many Israeli we have. Okay, we have 9 Israeli. Okay, perfect. Good mix. All right, so first order of business that we have, so that it's clear, you as a parliament member, you represent your district. You do not represent the whole Palestinian or the Israeli nation or the Israeli or the Palestinian state. You only represent your district of 47,000 people. I am the president. I've been elected by 1.5 million votes. So I represent the entire area. I am the president of the whole area, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. And from now on, we are conducting this simulation based on the acceptance of these, on the facts as presented in the assumptions. All right. Libby, would you be so kind as to read the Constitution? And this is a short version of the Constitution.
We believe that Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to equal rights under the law and guaranteed human rights and freedom. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation does not intend to supersede or supplant the Palestinian or Israeli governments, nor to abrogate or undermine any agreements between those governments. We recognize the need to work with the Israeli and Palestinian governments. Our purpose is to resolve conflicts and to expand the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis in a fair and equitable manner. We believe in equal rights under the law, guaranteed human rights, and freedom for all. We voluntarily give the legislatures and the governments of Israel and Palestine veto power over legislation we pass relating to the domain of control of those governments. We believe in the separation of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. We believe in the creation of a permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. We believe in having a separate judicial branch relating to IPC legislation with Israeli and Palestinian judges, with a system to avoid biased decisions based on nationality.
All right, so let me just go through the important part. We are not intending to supersede or supplement the Israeli or Palestinian government. We are a separate government. Whatever they wish to agree between them is fine with us. We are constitutionally prohibited from supplanting their agreements between them. We also agree to give a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian government over legislation that we pass. Does anyone have any questions regarding this constitution, including Dr. KEDAR?
Well, I have some comments. First of all, I would like to draw your attention to the article before the end. We believe in the separation of a permanent and creation of a permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no such an animal in the Middle East. Secular means detached from the religion. Unlike America and Europe, the Middle East, or the role of religion in the Middle East is, I would say, much more important than anything else.
Professor KEDAR, we first vote on it and then we'll let you make your comments. But I'm asking for questions at this time. Do you have any questions regarding the Constitution? Does anyone have questions? Okay, hearing no questions, let's vote. Palestinian parliament members, please, I see, Jay Johnson, you raised your hand, please ask. your
Well,
question.
I listed myself as a representative Israeli government, but in my my area is the Shah's party. I feel I represent the Shah's party.
There is no Shas party here. This is a separate government.
I understand, but if we're asking all of the people of both areas to cooperate on this, then
No.
there's
Are you a parliament member?
Yes, Israeli parliament member.
What district do you represent?
The southern area on the Dimona and that whole southern area. And
Okay, so you represent the Dimona area, okay?
yeah, and in particular, but segmented out the Shah's party. And I'd like to either discuss it now or later, but I think the Shah's party interests would directly conflict with the next.
Jay, you are not representing the Shas party. That would be a conflict of interest. You cannot run in the common government and in the Israeli party government. This is conflict of interest. You will be removed from the parliament because you are representing two different entities.
Very good. I understand. I accept what you're saying, and I will not. But I will raise the issue later of how of dealing with people who concern themselves with the Shah's party, which are 45% of the
Okay,
population.
do you have any questions?
No, that was my point.
Okay, any other questions, not comments and not,
I have a question.
Yehuda, yes. What's your question?
My question is first, the government of the Confederation has no sovereignty. Yeah, so
Well, we just.
so how
had-
can you call it a government? He has no sovereignty and no power on enforcing anything.
We just
And
finished an election of 14 million people were allowed to vote. I was elected by 1.5 million people. Our legitimacy comes from like any other democracy. We received I am the president. We have 300 parliament members who were elected. So our legitimacy comes from the elections that just been held. We are the only legitimate government in the area because the Israeli government is not the legitimate government of the entire area. The Palestinian governments is not the legitimate government of the entire area. We are the only legitimate government for the entire area because we gave the entire area an opportunity to vote, and we were elected by 4 million people.
14.
I don't know how it can be.
14 million people were allowed to vote, and I think 5 million people voted, and they are the one who gave us the legitimacy.
Legitimacy is based on law. Yeah, so his government is not has not been is not existing. You have to vote for it to.
Yes, and we
so
did.
you need a constitutional assembly or something to create a new state or to create. I mean,
No,
my feeling is
we-
that we are in a fiction. We are playing in a fiction. It's not
Okay, but
something,
you have
interesting.
questions, sir. You have questions rather than comments.
And my question, is there is no. What about Hamas? Is not one
No
government.
questions
with-
about the Constitution that you have in front of you.
Yes. How would you get one Palestinian government, for example?
Okay, that's not
It's-
based on the Constitution that is in front of you. You need to focus on what's in front of you right now. We are doing.
So your
incremental-
constitution is not based on the reality on the ground in
Well, okay.
in any way.
You-
It's just
you
your
have any-
imagination.
Okay,
Okay.
any questions, any other questions? Okay, hearing no questions, let's have a vote. Let's have the Palestinian parliament members. Please ratify the Constitution. Palestinian parliament members. Okay. Okay, We have 13 Palestinian parliament members. You need to vote. Okay, there is 10 people voted. One voted no, so the parliament members who voted no, he will be expelled from the parliament, because in order to participate in the parliament, you have to accept the constitution. So the person, who is the person who voted no? Can you please identify yourself? Okay, so he does not want to identify himself. That's fine. But he's expelled from the parliament, because in order to participate in our democracy, just like any other democracy in the world, in the entire world, you have to accept the constitution. Let's have the Palestinian parliament members, the Israeli parliament members, please vote. Israeli parliament members, please vote. Can you publish the results? Okay. 7 out of 9 voted yes. 2 voted no. They will also be expelled from the parliament, because they have not accepted the constitution, and therefore they are expelled, and they cannot vote on any subsequent legislation. So now that we have taken the vote, let's have Professor KEDAR give his comments regarding the Constitution.
Well, this constitution, first of all, talks about permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. This could be in Europe, when atheism is the name of the social game. It could also be in the United States, maybe in Western societies. It cannot be in Islamic societies. There is
Why
not
not?
even one Islamic state which detached itself from religion. And a matter of fact, anyone who declares that he detaches himself from religion.
But Professor, we are not an Islamic state. We are a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine.
Well, as much as I know, 94% of what people who are called Palestinians are Muslims. It's not 2 or 3 people. These are the vast majority of the Palestinians who are Muslims. Therefore, you cannot ignore their culture, their religion, their heritage, and their rules. Any Muslims who declares that he leaves Islam and he becomes secular, means without a religion, is endangering the connection between his head and shoulders. Literally.
Are you saying that Muslims will not vote for a secular government?
This is totally against their mindset. This is totally against their rules, against their religion, and against everything which they believe.
So how do you explain the fact that 2 million Palestinians in Israel vote for a Jewish state, in a Jewish state? Doesn't that contradict everything that you're saying?
You can ask even a better question. How come they accept?
I don't need to ask a better question. That's a good question.
No, I can give you even better a question. How could they accept a citizenship of a Jewish state as while they don't believe that Jews actually deserve a state? Because according to Islam, Jews and Christians, by the way, should live as dhimmis, as people under the auspice of Islam. After all, Judaism and Christianity are null and void, and only Islam is the religion of Allah's. This is why equality in religion, which appears later, is totally unacceptable in Islamic societies. This constitution could maybe work in Europe or in America. It doesn't work in the Middle East. And this is maybe one of the reasons why no American plan succeeded to work in the Middle East, neither in Afghanistan, nor in Iraq, nor here, never, because Americans think like Americans, while in the Middle East, the culture is totally different and people think like Middle Easterners.
But
And-
America never proposed a common government based on secular democracy. That's not historically correct.
Well, you have to read all kinds of peace plans, like Mitchell and others, who tried to bring peace between Israel and its neighbors. And when they begin,
I meant personally with Mitchell. He was not even close. He was negotiating two states.
whenever you pre-assume that Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state, in that moment, Muslims stop listening to you. Because according to Islam, Israel has no right to exist. It can exist only upon temporary agreements, which will prevail only as long as Israel is too powerful to be erased from the map.
But you
And
did not
this-
answer my question, Professor KEDAR. How isn't the fact that 2 million Muslims in the state of Israel are voting almost in the same rate as Israelis, doesn't that completely nullify the idea that Muslims will not participate in the election? Doesn't the fact that 6 million Muslims in America vote, doesn't
Not at
that,
Not at all. Everyone lives in a system which he forcibly accepts because he has no other choice, and this is the only game in this court, and he plays according to the rules, not because he wants the rules, not because he agrees to the rules, not because he believes that these rules are legitimate, but only because there are no other rule, there are no other game in this court. And this is why they vote to the Knesset. By the way, Knesset means for them Beit Knesset, as you might assume. But they participate in the state and everything because they want to survive. They cannot fight the state already 75 years since their failure, and the state is here. So as long as the state is here, they try to have a better situation by voting, but it doesn't mean that they accept it. While this whole simulation is based on mutual acceptance by Israelis and Palestinians as two entities which mutually accept each other as legitimate. And
let
this
me
is
ask you a
totally,
question.
this is
You-
totally, wait a minute, Joseph. This is totally out of the context of the Middle East, because Israel was never and will never be accepted as a legitimate state. As a state which can exist because it's of its power, yes, but not as a legitimate state which has the right to exist milechatchila, to begin with.
All right, let me ask you, you served in the Israeli intelligence for 25 years, so you have some knowledge of Israeli society and Israeli government. Do you,
No, intelligence is about the Arab world.
okay, based on your life experience, do you believe the Israeli government will oppose a common government?
The Israel, of course, we don't have anything against a Palestinian state. We
No, I'm
established
talking about a common government. Would the Israeli government oppose a common government, the way we presented this in this simulation?
if the Palestinian state recognizes the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state, most probably the Israel will reciprocatively, in both
I
ways.
know, but we are assuming that
Yes,
we are
of course.
assuming the same reality, but the creation of a common government, regardless of the Israeli government, regardless of the.
I'm more than sure that if there is a Palestinian government or a state which will acknowledge that the Jews have the right to live in this country on their forefathers' land, and the state of Israel is the embodiment of the Jewish people, definitely Israel will recognize the Palestinian state as a state of the Arab Palestinian people. Where is the problem? This is
I don't think you understand what I'm asking you. I am asking, would the government of Israel object to the creation of a common government, not Palestinian government, not Israel, not Hamas government, a common government, just the way we have exercised in this simulation? Would the Israeli government object to the creation of a common government? I emphasize common government.
It all depends. It all depends on the authorities of this common government. If this government can force anything on Israel, Israel will not allow anything like this, because Israel is a sovereign country, and just like the United States of America will never agree to a common government with Canada, which will be able to impose anything on the United States of America, the same thing is with Israel. Israel will never allow any entity above which will be able to impose anything on the state of Israel, because this is actually reduction of the sovereignty of the state. No state in the world will agree to reduce its sovereignty.
Okay, but this government gives the Israeli government a veto power over.
No.
Over the common government.
I'm not talking about the veto. I'm talking about reduction of sovereignty. If the common government can impose anything on the state of Israel, Israel, like any other country, will never agree to such a thing, because this is actually reduction of the, or I would say giving up of the statehood.
All
No
right.
state. I don't know another.
May
state
I?
in the world which
Hi,
is-
Mordechai, KEDAR. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just wondering, do you know of the European Union or the African Union?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Do you think such an arrangement is suitable for Israel as well, or this will never be applied to a country like Israel because it's unique?
Based on agreements, of sure. Look, let me give you a good example.
This is exactly, wait a second, Mordechai, wait a second, please. This is exactly what we are referring to here. A political arrangement that will not impose anything that Israel is not willing to, the same way that the European Union does not impose anything on Germany that it doesn't wish to.
Okay, if it doesn't
Thank you.
include imposition and everything is by agreements, so it goes. But just to remind you that Hungary, who is a part of the European Union, refuses to accept refugees, and nobody can force Hungary to accept refugees, although the Muslim refugees who come from everywhere in the world today to Europe are divided between Italy, France, Spain, and others. Hungary refuses to play in this game, so they are exempt. Definitely, nobody
All
can.
right, let's go to the next order of business, and that's the veto power. Libby, could you please read this?
The Confederation is the government of the entire population of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. We hereby bestow a veto power relating to legislation affecting sovereignty to the following: the government of Israel, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas. And in the event of changes in government, this legislation may be amended or repealed.
Does anyone have any questions regarding this granting of veto power? And you notice there is no veto on this veto legislation. This is our internal legislation. Does anyone have any questions about this?
So, what is the meaning of the government if it cannot impose anything?
It's not going to impose anything. It does not have superior power to the Israeli government. It has the power to create political scenario that both sides will see advantageous to join.
Means like advisory body?
No, you'll see. Well, we'll see. Okay, so let's vote on this veto power. Palestinian parliament members, please vote. Okay, let's publish the vote. 91% of the Palestinian parliament members voted yes. Let's have the Israeli parliament members vote. Okay, publish the vote. 91% vote of the Israeli parliament members voted yes. So we have agreed to give those three entities a veto power. And let's go to the next order of business, because Professor KEDAR asked us, what is the meaning of the veto power? Okay, let's have Libby please read the first. This is the first order of legislation that we are passing that gives a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. Please read it, please.
Both educational systems to teach tolerance in their public schools. Devote a certain number of hours for both sides to teach the history of the Israelis and the Palestinians. Prioritizing teaching Arabic and Hebrew in public schools to achieve proficiency of both languages by Israeli and Palestinian students. Create a mutual task force to ensure the teaching of both languages. Educators to draft textbooks together and arrange for a regular exchange of teachers. Public media on both sides to provide fair and equal coverage daily for teaching tolerance. IPC as the facilitator to ensure that both sides are fairly represented. We hereby submit this legislation to my chat is
The
covering.
Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas. We bestow upon them a veto power, which may be exercised in the next 60 days. So this legislation, we hopefully will pass, and the Israeli and the Palestinian governments have a veto power over it. Does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation? Questions? Hearing no questions, let's take a vote. Let's have Palestinian parliament members please vote first. Okay, and let's end the polling. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's have the Israeli parliament members vote next. Okay, publish the vote. 100% of the Israeli parliament members voted yes. So let's now go to the Hamas leader. Mr. Hamas leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No.
Let's go to the PA leader. Mr. PA leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No.
Let's go to the Israeli prime minister. Mr. Prime Minister, are you going to veto this legislation? Mr. Prime Minister, are you going to veto this legislation?
I would like to not veto it, but I don't think it's practical. I mean, you can't have public media on both sides for fair and equal coverage. That's not going to happen. There's a very, very robust media in Israel. There isn't on the Arab side.
Okay, but you're not vetoing it, correct?
No, I won't veto it.
All right, let's go to our speaker, Professor KEDAR. Could you give us your comments? You saw how the common government now passed legislation that you saw how the parliament members voted 100% for it. You saw how the Israeli and the Palestinian leaders did not veto it. Could you give us your opinion or your comments?
Well, for this, we have to look at the Palestinian media. After all, this is a media and education system. The education system in the Palestinian Authority so far does not have Israel on their maps. So far, and we are talking about almost 30 years since the establishing of the PA, yet their textbooks still do not have Israel on it, as if Israel does not exist. They don't teach their children that Israel is there in order to exist. This is one
All
thing.
right, so we have legislation that remedies this.
But but we saw that the mutual government cannot impose anything. How are you going to impose it? If the
Okay, I mean, this is one legislation. We'll go on to the next
yes,
one.
but the legislation cannot force anything on anybody, right? The
Okay,
second thing about the media, look at this map, which they put on their clothing, and this is the scarf which they use in demonstrations. Look at this. This says Palestine, and the country is the whole country, the whole state. There is no Israel, according to the Palestinian official PLO media and whatever being produced by them. Israel, including textbooks, Israel has no right to exist. And
all right, but
really,
but
how
we
can you-
are
how can
not,
you say-
but you're telling us what the Palestinians do. We are a common government. We understand that there is a problem. We pass legislation
Okay, so how can you
that
force?
requires both sides to teach tolerance. And you
Yes,
got,
but
you saw with your own eyes that the Hamas leader accepted it, that the PA leader accepted, that the Israeli prime minister accepted it.
What did Hamas accept?
Hamas leader was given an opportunity to veto this legislation, and he did not veto it. He accepted it. He is willing to
But this is
teach
totally-
tolerance.
But this is totally against the charter of Hamas. Totally.
There is nothing in the charter of Hamas, and even if it is, he accepted this legislation.
Who accepted?
Hamas leader, he just accepted in the simulation, he accepted this legislation.
Well, apparently the simulation is not attached to the reality.
All right, that's your opinion. Okay.
No. This is the fact.
You are
Hamas-
saying that in the reality, Hamas leader will veto this.
Hamas are vowed to totally destroy Israel and not leave even brick on a
I
brick.
understand, but I'm asking you,
Now,
are
what-
you
what
saying
kind
that
of
he will
simulation
veto it?
is it? So what kind of
I'm not asking for an explanation about Hamas. I'm asking, in your opinion, in reality, Hamas will veto this, correct? That's what you think.
totally?
Okay, all right. All right, let's go to the next legislation. Common police force, okay? You're asking how we are going to enforce this. Let's have Libby, could you please read this?
Yes. Equal number of Israeli and Palestinians at each level. Distinct uniforms for the common police force different from the Israeli or Palestinian police force. Independent of the Israeli and Palestinian security forces. In cooperation with the separate Israeli and Palestinian authorities. Address sensitive religious, cultural, and language requirements. Facilitate the operation of the joint economic zones. Investigate corruption by administrators who refuse to teach tolerance. Investigate allegations of intolerance and racist hate crime against Israelis or Palestinians. Assist in managing checkpoints. Guard the Parliament building and threats against members of the Confederation. Facilitate access to and safety of religious facilities. And we submit this legislation to the Israeli government and the Palestinian government and Hamas. We bestow upon them the veto power, which that can be exercised in the next 60 days.
All right. Does anyone have any questions, not comments, questions regarding this common police force legislation?
Yes, Joseph, our police, which has no sovereignty, can enforce anything on a sovereign state, on a foreign state, and two foreign states.
It's not enforcing
not
anything
possible.
against, it is the Israeli and the Palestinian government have a veto power over it. If they do not veto the legislation, then they are given it authority to enforce legislation specific that is specific to that is stated in this legislation. So it's giving consent. The Israeli and the Palestinian government agree to this. Any other questions? Okay, hearing no further questions, let's take a vote. The Palestinian parliament members, please vote. Okay, publish the vote. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members, please vote. Publish the vote. 90% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go to the Hamas leader. Mr. Hamas leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No.
Let's go to the PA leader. PA leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No.
Let's go to the Prime Minister of Israel. Are you going to veto this legislation?
Yes,
And is there anything we can do to amend the legislation so you would not veto it?
first of all, as a sovereign nation, I have a police force and I have a military. I don't need any other of my people working at a different level as a police force. I am also not having any other police forces securing my borders or my checkpoints, or challenging me for what you may think is intolerance or hate crimes.
I understand. Is
against
there
my people.
anything that we can amend in the Constitution, in the legislation?
You don't need a police force, period. If there is,
Mr. Prime Minister, you're talking about 74 years of failure on your part. And so we don't really take lessons from you of what we need or we don't need. We respect you because you have the power, but we do not accept lessons from you because you are not able to, you are proof of failure. So we want.
I am not a failed state. I'm the 8th most powerful state in the world. I am the 9th.
Yeah, but you're not able to give peace. We are talking about peace.
I cannot do peace with people who are terrorists and attacking.
Fine, and that's why that's why we created this common government, because of your failure. And in order to
it is not, I do not accept it as my failure. It is not my failure.
Fine.
I have offered peace. I cannot make peace with myself.
All right.
And
so basically you're saying there is nothing we can do to amend this legislation in order for you, there's nothing we can do. Okay, fine.
No, but you can. I would argue you can amend this and make it palatable and acceptable, and that is exclusive zones. You specify under the first 2 or 3 areas that the common police force will be operative in certain areas, let's say airports, transit, border control, and other areas and conversely, there's areas that will not quite be participating, particularly
will this be
areas
acceptable?
what the IDF sees as key military issues, let's say the border with Lebanon, with Hezbollah, etc., that there are certain areas where they do not have this and that they have their own exclusive operations.
Okay, Mr. Prime Minister, you heard this suggestion from the Israeli parliament members. Are you willing to accept his proposal?
actually, no, I'm not having anybody at checkpoints other than my own people. It's my country and I'll decide who comes in and out. And borders and airports, no.
Okay, So, like I told you before, I am going to be working hard in order to break your coalition and to remove you from being the prime minister, because in my opinion, you are not a prime minister of peace. You're harming peace, and I will do whatever I can as the president of the whole area to remove you and to have another Israeli prime minister who is more reasonable. Let's go to the next legislation because we don't have time to
Wait,
make
wait,
it.
wait a minute. I have a comment here.
Yes, sir.
Please go back to the previous. Look at the last line. Facilitate access to and safety of religious facilities. Well, whatever we deem as religious facilities, the Muslims do not accept. First of all, the Temple Mount, they say that the temple was in another place. It doesn't belong to Jews, Temple Mount. Secondly, Kever Rachel, the tomb of Rachel, they claim that this is a tomb of a guy named Bilal ibn Rabah. Thirdly, the tomb of Joseph near Shechem, near Nablus, they claim this is a tomb of a sheikh, not. So whatever is viewed as sacred by Jews is not acceptable by Palestinians. This is why there is imbalance in this. And the common police force.
But sir, we are not a Israeli or Palestinian. We are a common government. We can sit together and work together to decide and designate what are religious facilities. And it really, quite frankly, doesn't matter if it is Jewish or Muslim or Christian. If it is a religious facility, we will protect it regardless of its.
You don't get the idea. According to Islam, Judaism is null and void. Just like Christianity.
But we are not Islam. We are not Islam. We are a common secular government.
Joseph, whatever Jews claim that it belongs to them because of history or religious issues, they are lying, because Jews have lost everything, because they betrayed Allah by changing his holy scriptures, and therefore Allah threw them to exile and then live in exile as a punishment for the crimes which they committed against Allah. So now they cannot come and claim that they have sacred places. And this is why this line is totally detached from reality. And many other lines as well.
It is not, the reality is that we are a common government. The reality is that we are a secular common government. The reality is that we are entitled to designate areas as religious facility or religious location.
Who gave you the authority?
The people. We were elected by 5 million people. We are the government. We got the authority.
This is a totally baseless pre-assumption, because Palestinians will never vote for anything which declares itself to be secular and will be superior to their own religious government. Whether it's
but they already voted in a Jewish democracy that is in a Jewish state. That totally contradicts your hypothesis. All right, let's go to the next legislation.
The Palestinians, since they are mostly Muslims, they couldn't care less about what we do in the state of Israel when it comes to religions. They are sticking to Islam and to the Islamic teachings, and everything which does not take Islamic teachings as a pre-assumption is totally baseless.
All right, so in the assumptions that we had, we assumed that 3 million Palestinians would vote.
Well,
are you challenging that assumption?
Yes, definitely.
How many Palestinians, in your opinion, will vote in a common election?
30. Those who can benefit from this plan.
Okay, I can tell you this, that we had other professors who gave us much higher numbers, including Islamic professors who gave us in the millions. But
Well, I'm only 55 years in the profession. I'm only 55 years dealing with these issues.
Yeah, but you never participated in the issue of whether Palestinians will vote in a common election.
I was an activist in a peace organization named Netivot Shalom along the 90s, since I was released from the army in 1995 until late 2000. And I was in many activities of the peace organizations like Shalom Achshav, and I was myself in Netivot Shalom, and I have many hours with Arafat and many other with others. It took me a while until I found out that they all are lying to us, are all deceiving, and the whole thing is a deception. And
Because they do not accept the concept of a Jewish state. This is a different concept. But when you speak about lying, you cannot say that about Muslim Israelis. They vote just like Israelis, Jews.
again,
So,
they
so
vote.
I cannot emphasize that this is really contradicting reality, what you're saying. You
Well,
have,
first of all, they are voting for parties which try their best to demolish the fact that Israel is a state of the Jewish people. This is
Yes.
the agenda of Bala, this is the agenda of Hadash, this is the agenda of Tal, and even from the Knesset, they are trying to undermine the existence of this Jewish state. Why? Because the Supreme Court allowed them, only because they cannot achieve the goal. So this is the reality.
right, they are entitled to be against the Jewish state because they're
Of
not
course.
Jews. They're not Jews, but
Right.
they're not Jews. Why
Right,
would
they're
they,
not
why
Jews.
would they not work against a Jewish state when they're not Jews?
Okay, so
But they are
against the Jewish
participating
state.
in the democracy. You
Right.
just
They
said
are-
that they are working within the democracy
Right.
in order to undermine the concept of a Jewish state. That
So-
to me tells me that they are willing to work within the democratic system.
Democratic system only as long as it serves their goals to
Of
undermine
course.
the existence
Of
the
course,
state.
everybody does that.
Okay.
All right, let's go to the next simulation, joint economic zone. Libby, could you please read it?
The Joint Economic Zone, JEZ, between Israel and Gaza. Exclusive IPC management and control. A common economy. Education, industry, agriculture, sewer treatment, desalination plants, solar farms, wind power, and green energy. International airport and seaport. Equally accessible to Israeli and Palestinians. And we submit this legislation to the Israeli government, Palestinian governments, Hamas, and bestow upon them a veto power, which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation?
Yes.
Yeah, Len, go ahead.
When you talk of a joint economic zone, you're talking about something big enough to have airports and seaports?
Correct.
That's going to take up all of Gaza to start off with.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't. In order to have a seaport, but that's a technical question. It doesn't. You can have a seaport, and in fact, Gaza have both right now. But you can have both seaport, and we are talking about using part of the area of Gaza and part of the area of Israel. Any other questions?
Have you heard about Erez Industrial Zone?
Yes, I did.
What do you
That's
think
not
about
under common government. It's under Israeli control.
this? Was a common a place.
There was
which-
never a common government before. There has never existed.
Joseph, it is based in both Gaza and Israel, and the people were working in Gaza, making money, and Israeli investments and Israeli money. Since Hamas took over in 2007, the Erez area doesn't work because Hamas couldn't care less about their own people. They couldn't care less about the welfare of their own people. And from their point of view, Erez could go to hell as long as they are fighting against Israel. So
All
what do
right.
you talk about Hamas.
I am talking about a common joint economic zone under common
With Hamas?
government.
With Hamas,
Yes, with Palestinians.
demonstrated that they
No,
couldn't care less
with
about.
Palestinians from Gaza. With Palestinians from Gaza.
Yes, but they don't care about this.
Well,
Who is they,
every
Mordechai?
government,
Hamas,
every
Hamas
government
government.
needs to limit. All right, let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote. Okay, 100% of the end the polling, 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted. Let's have the Israeli parliament members vote. Okay, publish the vote. 90% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go to Hamas leader. Mr. Hamas leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No,
Let's go to the PA leader. Mr. PA leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No.
Let's go to the Israeli prime minister. Mr. Prime Minister, are you going to veto this legislation?
Yes,
And can we, any changes we can make in order for you to make it acceptable to you?
first of all, you have to take off the line that says exclusive IPC management and control. Israel is one of the biggest agriculture, sewer treatment, desalinization. They are the major force in the world. Why would we expect the IPC? to
Okay,
take
so
over
let's say we
control?
take the exclusive out. Will you be will you accept this legislation?
Well, then you're not saying who's running it. You're just saying a common area.
IPC management and control. I took the word exclusive. I said
Well,
IPC.
no, it's not. It's take out that whole line. I mean, the management and control is going to have to be Israeli because they're the best in the whole world. So why would you want second?
So you want it under exclusive Israeli control? That's what you want.
Of course.
But it could be joint control. You have joint control. You have to start with the building block someplace.
Yes, but you're not going to start with a building block of people that know nothing about it.
Okay. So
I
will you agree to
I
a
agree.
joint?
I agree
Well-
I agree on a joint economic zone, but I think the best people that can run it have to run it, and that's not.
Allow me to suggest a compromise. It would be IPC administration, but under strict supervision from both Palestinian and Israeli authorities, and Israel would always have veto power on the appointment of members of the board and also on the decisions made.
Would that be acceptable?
That's kind of confusing to me. To me, the private sector is going to be building these things, whether they're Palestinian or Israeli, or outside agencies like China.
Okay, I think we understood the point. We don't have to beat every legislation to death. Let's go to Professor KEDAR and hear his comments after you saw the simulation. We want to hear your comments.
In the year of 2000, Israel planned to have 7 industrial zones along the borders between Israel and the West Bank. Just like Erez in Gaza, Israel planned 7 giant industrial zones where Palestinians will be able to work, make money, bring home money, and Israeli investors and so forth. Arafat rejected it totally. He said, you cannot achieve economic peace before there is a political peace with Israel, which will take out Jerusalem and will bring Israel to the seashore of Tel Aviv. So he objected it, and he started the Intifada in September 2000. And this is, as I said, these leaders could not care less about these people, about their own people, and in their own view, their people can go to hell and money could go to the sea, because they want to destroy Israel and not live with Israel. And this is the most problematic pre-assumption of this presentation, which assumes that the Palestinians are going to accept Israel as a Jewish state. And this is
the simulation does not assume that the Palestinians will accept Israel as a Jewish state.
well, implicitly it assumes, because otherwise there was no such a plan. Therefore, Joseph, listen, I'm sorry I have to run because a cab is in 2 minutes is coming to take me. I will leave you with the simulation. It's okay. And if you really want, whenever you like, just let me know. I will give you a whole lecture, real lecture about the culture of the Middle East and what is the only solution to the Israeli-Palestinian problem, a solution which is based on sociology of the Middle East and not on dreams which people in the United States of America are dreaming. Because dreams in the United States might be good for the United States. They don't work in the Middle East ever. There is not even one solution of the Americans which brought to the Middle East. This is the source of failure in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Somalia, here in the Israeli-Palestinian issue. Nowhere Americans succeeded to bring a remedy to the problems of the Middle East, because Americans keep thinking like Americans, and this is okay. But their way of thinking is totally detached from the culture, from the history, from the religion, and from the tribalism in the Middle East.
Let me ask you a question. How is it that Israel accepts everything American? It accepts American weapons. It accepts American policy, political coverage. It accepts medicine. It accepts the culture. Everything American is very welcome in Israel, except peace. The concept of peace is totally rejected, but everything else American is considered to be a very high level, very acceptable system.
Because when Americans develop cars, these cars are very good, so we can use them. When Americans develop airplanes, these airplanes are very good, so we can acquire them and we can use them very well. When Americans develop medicines, these medicines are excellent and we can use them. But when Americans develop things and battlefields which involve the knowledge of the culture of the Middle East, the Americans fail before the Israelis. So the Americans, look, if Americans will try to shape Russia or to shape other cultures, they will fail again as well. America doesn't succeed to bring remedy to the problems of Africa as well, because Americans think like Americans, not like Africans, not like Muslims, and not like Arabs, and not like Russians. And this is the difference. When you develop an airplane or a medicine or a car, which works, definitely it works in America and it works in Israel. But when you try to design a solution for societies while you know nothing about these societies, definitely you will fail.
Are you saying that the Zionist Israeli Jewish culture government was developed after it rejected a secular system, secular democracy for Israelis and Palestinians together, that it was actually considered and rejected?
Well, Israel was established and survived in spite of the objection of the Palestinians and all the Arabs and all the Muslims. So this is why Israel is a story of success, while the whole Arab world is a story of...
I know, but you're not answering my question. My question is, you said when American planes are working well, Israel acquires it. I'm asking you, was there a actual decision by Israel, by the leaders of Israel, to consider a secular democracy for everyone, and actually rejected that notion? Was there ever an attempt to create a secular democracy for everyone, just like an attempt to acquire an American plane?
Again, secular democracy is something which can work in America. It doesn't work in the Middle East. So why to try it?
Of course, only religious nationalism, Mordechai. We should all just live with our people, kick out everyone who's not Jewish from our country, and everyone will just live according to their own people. That's the best solution for the Middle
about
East.
the Arab world and the Islamic world.
The Arab world is very different from
If you
us.
want a whole
We are
lecture about
Jews.
Israel,
Jews are
I can give you about-
special. Jews only have to live with Jews, Mordechai. We should live in a country with no other people but Jews, right?
Zohar, my dear, if you
Yes,
want a
Mordechai.
whole discussion about Israel, I can give you a whole lecture about Israel. I'm talking now about the Middle East and the Arab world.
Mordechai, I'm sorry, but you're not qualified to speak about the Middle East because you're speaking as a foreigner here. With all due respect, I don't know how
My
many books
dear.
you read, but being the most Israeli expert on Islam or the Middle East does not really count for much. It's
Zohar,
like
how
saying
is
the
your
best
Arabic?
Chinese
Let me
expert
ask.
on the US.
Zohar, how is your Arabic?
Pretty well,
Do you read Arabic?
as much as I can.
As much as you can. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm not in a place to argue about my qualities about the Middle East. So far, I can show you all my list of publications. And after 25 years in the intelligence, I do know something. The intelligence
Yes,
would
in
not
the
hold me
Israeli
for what-
intelligence, Mordechai, do not forget that.
Okay, gentlemen, I have to run. I apologize for I have to run. If you, Joseph, if you want a real presentation about the problems of the Middle East and how to solve them, including the Palestinian problem, I will be more than ready to address your audience and to show them how to think about the Middle East and therefore how to design solutions for the Middle East.
Mordechai, only if you agree that we will ask questions and we will have a debate after your talk.
The harder the questions are, the better. Let's have an agreement. I will speak for like an hour, and I will give you 2 hours to ask questions and to give me hard time.
Okay.
Agreed? Joseph, thank you so much for
All right,
giving-
thank you, Mordechai. Thank you so much.
And first of all,
And-
let me thank you, Joseph, let me thank you, first of all, for willing to bring remedy to the Israeli-Palestinian problem. This is a big step, even the willing to bring some remedy here. Secondly, the ways have to be little different. So if you really want to know how to think about the Middle East and how to solve the problems, if you give me these 2-3 hours with your audience, I'll be more than happy and I'll be honored to address you guys.
All right, thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you so much.
All right,
Have a good day.
thank you. All right, let's open up for discussion. Now we have, if people want to make comments, Asim. Okay, please raise your hand. Otherwise, if there are no comments, oh, okay, Olivia and Zohar and Jay. Olivia, please ask your question or your comment.
Well, thank you. Yes. Hi, Joseph. Well, I heard Mr. Kedar. I heard him talking about his 7-state plan, his 7-state solution, 7 or 8, I can't remember. And I thought, well, my God, what kind of a sick joke is this? But I was intrigued. I wanted to hear more of what he was saying. He outlined it. It was a talk that lasted about an hour, perhaps, so only time just to outline it. He thought that the best solution would be to create lots of little states based on the Emiratis. Now, it's not something that I would wish for my worst enemy, we in the West. But I'm not Arabic. I don't have his expertise, etc., etc. So I was intrigued. I was curious. Emiratis, they would be little mini states in which a family in Jenin, a family in Hebron, a family. He named a few of the other places in
Olivia,
the West Bank.
Olivia, can I stop you for a second?
Well, just let me. I won't be very long.
I need to go to the bathroom. I hope you would not be insulted.
Oh, I can't. I can't say don't go to the bathroom. That would be dramatic.
Yeah.
Do I
But
just
go ahead,
hang on?
and
What do
then
I do? Do I
after
just
you-
wait?
after you, Zohar and Jay, and I'll be right back.
Well, I'll just hang on, okay? Sorry, Joseph.
Hi, Olivia, it's Len. I don't know that when he says an 8-state solution, he means all of that within Israel. I think he may be meaning like a European Union group with other Arab states around the area. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I just don't know what he means by it.
Sure. Well, I understood, Len. Hi, it's Olivia. I understood that it was going to be in the area that is now what you call Judea and Samaria, what other people call the West Bank or
Okay,
whatever. I understood
didn't-
it was going to be in that space, Len. Now, he didn't mention his plans for the Palestinian Israelis that live in Israel now, that are that number, I think 1.8 million. There was no mention of those, but then it was just an outline, okay? Nor did he mention who was going to nominate the family. It read like some kind of a novel set in the Ottoman days of the 19th century. In fact, I'm thinking of one or two writers that I'm very fond of. You know, when there was clan voting, and that continued for a long time and still does exist. We know that. A family that passed on power to brothers or nephews, or I don't know, perhaps children. This was what he outlined, Len. And these little mini states, I'm not sure who would nominate the family. He didn't go into that. I suppose Israel. There would be transport available between the little states. Okay.
I'm not sure that's at all what it is. That after this,
he'll tell us, Len. He'll tell us when he comes and talks about it, because it was just an outline, but he did mention all these things that sounded rather odd, because those Emiratis are, for us in the West, are dictatorships, where they have yes, they have stability. He said how wonderful they were because they're stable. But stability comes at a high price. They don't allow political dissent. They have medieval type judicial systems. And we know that there are some odd practices in West Bank villages as well, because their judicial systems are sometimes a mixture of Jordanian law, of British mandate law, of Israeli modern law. And sometimes some of their practices are rather weird, you know, so that
Okay,
too.
I'm back.
Yeah, okay. If he's coming, you come back, Joseph. Sorry, Len, if he's come back. Has he come back?
I'm back.
Oh, you're back, Len. Sorry.
Yeah.
Len was saying that he too had heard about the 7-state solution that Mr. KEDAR had proposed. And
8-state
I was
solution.
saying to Len what I had understood and what Mr. KEDAR outlined. It was less than 1 hour, but perhaps less, I'm not sure. He outlined what he thought would be a good solution, the only solution. No, he stressed the only solution for the Palestinians of the West Bank. He didn't mention those Palestinians, those Israeli Palestinians. They weren't mentioned, okay? So I'm not sure what his plans. I'm not sure whether they'd have a little tent of their own. I'm not sure. He mentioned these little mini states that would create stability, like the Emiratis. And as I was saying to Len, the stability comes at a very high price. There's no political dissent. There are no parliamentary elections. Power is passed on, you know, from one family member, from the ruling family member to a brother, or usually male, or children or nephews, or I don't know. All that would be discussed. And he also mentioned that these little states they'd be allowed to visit one another. There'd be some kind of transport. I think it was going to be free to organize by Israel between the states. Now, between you and me, Israel would make sure that these little states were at each other's necks, of course. That would be part of it. And I was also saying to Len, the whole thing reminded me of, well, for example, we consider the Emiratis to be dictatorships, and not what I'd, you know, as I said to Len, not what I'd wish for my worst enemy. But then I don't know Palestinians, and I also, so I'm not very familiar with Palestinians. I don't know where the diaspora Palestinians that have been living in democracies, where they come into it. I'm not sure. But my question to him would have been, I was curious to ask him, Mr. Moore, I'll just get to my questions, and then I'd like to hear someone else talking. My questions to Mr. KEDAR, Joseph, would have been, had I been able to speak to Mr. KEDAR, would have been...
I don't know, if they don't feed him, we'll make him a soup.
Sorry, are you still listening, Joseph?
Yeah, I'm listening, but I
think my questions would have been, is your proposal evidence-based? Do you have scientific evidence for such a serious proposal that you are stressing that it is the only proposal. Do you have scientific evidence like massive opinion polls showing that 80 or 90% of Palestinians would go for this, would love it? And my second was a comment was going to be a request. He spoke about Europeans and said, well, Europeans only woke up to the fact that what happened, how Arab people treat their citizens after the Khashoggi murder. This journalist that was chopped up in little barbecue pieces because he was a dissident journalist, and because he was working with the Washington Post. Let's say that was why. And they just spoke up. Now, there I would like to tell him to please make a distinction between European governments that have lucrative trade with the state of Israel and civil society within Europe. There are 26 or 27, lost count, European countries, most of which have civil societies, healthy civil societies, that voice their opinion, and many of these civil society, many of these people are pro-Palestinian and are ashamed of their governments that have been voted into power, deeply ashamed of their governments. Hungary is a very awkward problem. Hungary and Poland, not just on the part of Hungary because of the immigration problem, because they're messing with their judiciary, and that is under review, constant review in Brussels. Obviously, they can't do what they are doing, and it comes under discussion. So I would have asked Mr. Whatever his name is, KEDAR, next time he mentions Europeans, not to make such a sweeping statement, and to realize that there is a disconnect in many countries, between us in civil society, many of us in civil society, I can't say most, many of us in civil society, and the governments that have been voted into power. And this is expressed freely, which I don't think you can do in the Emirati states. And it is expressed freely in Italy, which is a country with, thousands, which awfully serious problems, terribly serious. Strange as it may seem, there is freedom of speech. And Italians now are expressing just what
let's go to
I want to listen to others. Thank you, Joseph.
Okay.
Let me listen to
let's
others.
go to Zohar.
Okay.
Zohar, and then Jay, and then for some reason I only see
Len is also raising his hand.
Jay, and okay, Zohar, go ahead.
Hi, Joseph. Thank you. And I do apologize for barging into the conversation earlier when Mr. KEDAR was speaking. As a general comment, it seems that some of the people here are not really interested in having a debate or a conversation, and they come with prejudgment about the Palestinians or the Muslims or about any kind of arrangement that can be done, and are here only to stifle the conversation and troll it using the powder of our time. Someone like MORDECHAI KEDAR, though I appreciate his credentials, I don't see the benefit of granting a former general in the intelligence offices any kind of platform if that person rejects entirely any possibility of a peace, using a racist claim that all Muslims are X or all Palestinians are Y. This is truly counterproductive, as with the same people that are here only to disrupt the conversation or any kind of meaningful progress. Please, I urge you, if you do not believe in peace, if you think that all Palestinians are bad, all Jews are right, and we are the best ones and we can only run the country, please go find your friends somewhere else. This is a conversation among people with open-minded that are trying to create something better. You're not doing anything but disrupting the conversation. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that the idea of peace has been resolved by people a long time ago, and that is democracy. If when we had a king and someone suggested a democracy, the same type of excuses came up. Well, how are we going to give people that never don't know how to read, how to write, how they don't understand policies, how are we going to give them the right to vote? There is always, in my opinion, excuses upon excuses to avoid democracy. But democracy is about equality. It's about fairness. and giving the people the right to believe that they are participant of the conduct, regardless of their background, regardless of their religion, regardless of their education. Democracy works. And any idea for peace that does not involve democracy, in my opinion, is not a true peace proposal. That's my opinion. Let's go to Jay and then Len and then Giacomo.
My impression is that there's a long time tendency to be blinded by the status quo. And KEDAR did that. He said, this, I will tell you for 2 hours or so, the history of the Middle East, and that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it's always going to be. And
Right.
you Americans don't understand what the hell's going on here.
Right.
And we've lived through hundreds of years, and this is the way it is. Well, of course, the Turkish Empire controlled it, and they were wiped out in World War I. That changed things big time. But look at what happened in Northern Ireland. Look what happened in South Africa. These were people who were wedded strongly to their beliefs for decades and changed their minds. My argument is that there are entities within Israel and the Palestinian community and that will, quote unquote, change their minds. I raise the issues of the Shah's party. 45% of the voting electorate is Shah's party, ultra-conservative, mainly Haredi and Sephardics. And I would argue that there are many Sephardics who are not fundamentalist in the political sense within Israel. They have their own self-interest, but their religious interests and observances and support network being very low income, generally speaking. But they are not a monolithic bloc within Israel. They've talked about that, thought about that. Same thing we heard today about Hamas. Hamas, this, that, and the other about their constitution. There's differences within Hamas. They've moderated some of their key positions. Hezbollah is another example. They just signed a joint agreement with Israel in Lebanon to develop their offshore oil. Hezbollah was a big part of that, and they settled. So this idea that this is the way it's been for hundreds of years and nothing's going to change and you people don't understand, I think we should reject that. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Reject that.
Exactly.
And we should
Good for
come
you.
up and keep an open mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Good for you. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go to Len.
Okay, I think what I've seen Mordechai on TV many times, so I've heard bits and pieces. I don't know what he means, and I'm not sure Olivia does either, what he means by an eight-state solution. I don't know if Olivia seems to think
He
it's
has a
way too-
whole presentation about that.
Yes, but what is it? I don't know what that means. I think 8 states means like a European Union with Israel, the Palestinians, and maybe the Abraham Accord states. I'm not sure what it means. I'm going to look it up after we get off here. I think what Qatar basically believes is the IPC is like the European Union that can only exist once there are 2 states, once there is a Palestinian state and a recognized Israeli state and a recognized Palestinian state. And then you have the IPC as a body like the European Union or the African Union or there's the Union of the Americas. I think that's what he means. I don't think he's saying, I think he strongly believes in 2 states, by the way. And then he says he thinks the IPC can be useful, but not replacing the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I think that's what he means.
Well, I saw a presentation of what but to be honest, I was so disgusted, I stopped in the middle. And it was basically, from what I saw, he was saying that he believes that Arabs, I hate to say that because I'm just telling you what he believes, that they believe in a tribe and there has to be a head of tribes. And he said, let's divide them into 8 tribes. He believes
Yes,
there are 8.
that's exactly what he said, Joseph. Sorry, that's exactly what he said. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and he also has on the map areas in which they will live. To me, it sounded like 8 ghettos where they would live. But like I said, I was so disgusted when I was watching it that I stopped watching. I couldn't take it anymore. But nevertheless, I invited him because I am committed to invite people of all points of views. All right, Len, you have anything else to add?
No, I've never heard of this 8-point thing, and I
Yeah,
mean,
I saw it in Hebrew, so it may not be in English. I don't know. But,
well,
It is, Joseph, because I heard it in English.
oh, okay,
It's also in English, yes.
okay.
Brother
Let's
Joseph,
go-
Shlomo also has his hands on. I know that Giacomo is next, but Shlomo is trying to raise his hand and he said so earlier.
Okay, so let's go to Giacomo and then Shlomo.
Okay, yeah, my comment was actually as an answer to Zohar, but also another comment on what Joseph just said. To meet among like-minded people is fine, but actually the solution here is if we can actually bring together people who think completely differently, because I think that's the only way to come to a real workable solution to bridge the gaps that exist in Israel between Israelis and Palestinians. So, and that's why I commend Joseph's invitation towards people who have views which might find objectionable, but it's important to listen to their point of view and try and find practical ways to overcome these. The nice thing of the IPC is precisely this: is you find a working way forward to bring people together who have completely dramatically different opinions. Mr. KEDAR mentioned Hungary and the EU. Hungary is the one that's always vetoing. They don't want to apply European legislation, but there's dialogue. In Europe, the Hungarians are sitting at the table. They might disagree with 90% of what the EU does. The EU disagrees 90% of what Orban is doing. But we're sitting around the table, we're talking to each other, and we find practical ways to overcome these decisions. I am not changing your mind, you're not changing mine, but let's work together on something practical. That's why I like the IPC formula, and this is exactly what we should be working on.
Thank you, Giacomo. All right, let's go to Shlomo.
You're muted.
Start again, Shlomo.
Shlomo, you're muted.
Unmute yourself and start again.
Sorry. So the first problem I have with KEDAR is that he is racist. He essentially, somehow sees the Israelis or the Jews as supreme kind of tribe compared to the other tribes who are, of course, inferior. Number one, and number two, and therefore it limits the conversation to begin with. If this is the basic assumption, then we have a problem. Number two, his theories are based on part lies, part truth, and kind of a mix of the two. And so how can you build, so his theory is totally false. His idea, but there is an answer to his suggestion about 8 ghettos, as you describe it, you're right. The ghetto of Hebron, ghetto of Nablus, ghetto, the cities will be like ghettos, and then the rest will be whatever, of course, under Israel. I would suggest to him to add Haifa as another city, ghetto, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and in those ghettos, there will be some ghettos, like in Jerusalem, there are all kinds of tribes there too, and so on and so forth. We'll go to a hierarchy of ghettos to be consistent with his idea. If he doesn't agree to this, then, of course, there is nothing to talk about. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Shlomo. All right, are there any other hands that I don't see because they don't appear on the participant?
Len Bennett has his hand up.
I'd like to make a comment to Shlomo. You make a comment about Jews being superior or superior race. That is an anti-Semitic comment. I've never heard a Jew say that.
No, he didn't
I've always
say
heard
that.
Yes, he did say that. And I
No,
only
he
heard
said
that.
No, he said that Mordechai KEDAR viewed the Jews.
No, you said he believes that. He did not say that. You did. And that's anti-Semitic.
No, he said
Saying that someone else said something else is anti-Semitic.
It is not anti-Semitic. This is anti-KEDAR, if you like, but it is not on the contrary. What he says rings to me, oh, the Jews are this and the Jews
No,
like for
that's-
2000.
that's-
No, let me
that's-
finish. No, let me
That's
finish.
your anti-Semitic
No, let me
interpretation.
finish. For
I
2000
hate you
years,
already.
Christians especially were talking about the Jews. There's some different animals, and eventually they are now rats that we can actually put pesticides, kill them with pesticide. That were the way they talked about Jews for 1,000 years. He talks about Arabs and Muslims, and that's the thing that is so disturbing in the whole attitude. So I hope you understand me now.
Let me just make some comments about that, because I hear these objections time and time again about generally Arabs and Muslims and not being democratic. And the reality is that Jews have not been democratic either. They have not, until they came to Palestine in Israel, 1948, 99% of them came from Arab countries, from Russia, from Poland, from North Africa. None of them were democratic. So you could have created whatever argument you wanted, attach it to their religion, because there is no way to refute that unless you actually practice it, until you actually have a democracy. There are people in China that do not have a democracy. So you could say that Chinese people are not democratic because whatever you want to attach to their character. This is all nonsense, in my opinion. Everyone loves democracy. Everyone loves equality. Everyone wants to be treated fairly, regardless of your religion, regardless of your background. My mother came from Iraq. She never voted in her life. And she came to Israel, lived there for 16 years, I believe. And then she voted all of a sudden. Until then, you could have said that Jews are not voting. They believe in God. They believe in kings, But we have to progress. Any other comments? All right.
Well, no, sorry, Joseph. I just wanted to say that
So Esther is here.
I can identify with what Giacomo says, in that it's very easy to talk to people when we have the same ideas. And it's nice and it's fun and it's pleasant to exchange ideas, because they're never 100% the same. But people that think along the same lines as I do, well, that's lovely. But what's important is to talk to those who are at the opposite end of the spectrum.
Exactly.
And see why and feel the fear that they feel. I feel that Israelis, sometimes there's a great deal of fear. I think sometimes it verges on paranoia. And I think this has been provoked sometimes. I would go as far as saying that during the Netanyahu years, there was fear mongering, and there's a very divided society in Israel. All the ones that are on top, the Ashkenazi ones, and then the Mizrahis, the Sephardi, and then you can go further down the immigrants, and then sort of down in the basement, the Palestinians. I mean, they're all there, they're sort of stuck way down the basement. And that for a start is unhealthy, for Jews. And I'll just say this, it's awful. If you happen to read Primo Levi's novel, Primo Levi was an Italian writer who, a Jewish man, a chemist, who was deported to Auschwitz. He survived and came back. And he was a Sepharditi, like many Italian Jews. And he said, which was so absolutely so awful, he said the first time he met racism, discrimination, was when he went to Auschwitz. And he discovered that, these Ashkenazi people look down on him. It's all so horrible, so shocking, but interesting. Interesting. A Jewish man.
Let's have Dale. She wants to speak.
Yeah, of course, and thank you anyway. Interesting, important to talk to those who don't think like us. End of story.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. All right, Dale.
Yes, I have a question. I'm new to this group, so you may have already talked about it, but I'm going to ask anyway. How I live in California, by the way. I lived in Israel over 50 years ago. It was a long time ago. But how how can we expect that the Haredis in Israel, who are increasing, are ever going to give up their religious schools? And you know, it's you can discuss with people when you have the same values and you want to reach the same goals. But when people have different values and they believe that God gave all this land to me and not to them, I don't know. And they're becoming the majority or such a large, I don't know how can we get rid of those religious schools that brainwash them?
You can't, and it's their right.
I don't think you want to.
Right.
I don't think you want to. People can live in a democracy and have their beliefs. What we are saying is you can have your religious belief and the other person could have a different religious belief, but we can live together. I live in a very Jewish Orthodox area in Los Angeles. And we live in peace. I am not Orthodox. They live in peace with non-Jews. No one is throwing rocks at each other when we are driving on a Sabbath. Very respectful. The idea is how to respect each other. That's all.
But they're going to keep making more settlements on Palestinian land and
Well,
destroy.
that's a different issue. That's a different issue. And the common government would create a democratic system to deal with each and every issue, including the settlements, including the refugees.
But the Israelis will never agree to that, a common government like that.
The Israelis are not a monolithic system.
But the Haredi are becoming monolithic.
They are not monolithic. They have different views, and they will accept a common government. Not all of them, but I believe that if we have an election for a common government, which brings me to the last slide that I want to show. And if we have a common government, I believe that we will be able to have enough Israelis and Palestinians. All right, let's do the post-simulation survey. Dan? After participating in the simulation, do you support a common government? Let's say we have a lot less people now, but okay.
Yeah, I'm not computer savvy, but I want to vote in favor. I can't find on my phone where.
Okay. You should have it on your screen. You can, but okay. Okay, let's stop it. And 89 versus 11% voted in favor of the common government. And let me share the screen and have the okay. I believe that Israeli-Palestinian government, I mean, it's not whether I believe it or not, it's a fact that neither the Israeli nor the Palestinian governments were able to make peace. Democracy equal equality, which equals peace. The country of Estonia with 9.5 million people, 40% of them vote online. So it is possible to have online election. Common election is possible. A daily war with Gaza and Israel is $100 million. $100 million will make this a reality by far. So we need grassroots support, and we're asking you to share and participate. And I'm also asking you to join the next, it's not going to be a simulation, it's going to be a presentation by me about the IPC past and what we accomplished, which we did, and what our challenges for the future. So anybody else want to say? Abed, go ahead, Abed. You need to unmute.
Oh, yes. Good morning to everybody. Good evening.